I ask that you all join me in this moment to reflect upon and acknowledge that Staten Island is a traditional land and ancestral home of the Lenape people and is occupied territory. In the process of colonization, the Lenape people were removed from the land, but many remain among the still present tribal communities of the region. We acknowledge the continued presence of the Lenape in their homeland and affirm the aspiration of the great Lenape chief Tamanend that there be harmony between the indigenous people of this land and the descendants of the immigrants to this land, as long as the rivers and creeks flow and the sun, moon, and stars shine. Also, in the spirit of artist and producer Adrian Wong, we must acknowledge that this event utilizes technologies and services that are not available in many indigenous and rural communities and contribute significantly to climate change, which disproportionately impacts indigenous communities worldwide. We encourage all of you to consider your role in the stewardship of the land and your allyship in recognition and reconciliation and decolonization. Thank you.
Welcome to Immigrant Heritage Week 2023. And welcome to Immigrants Are Us, the Generations Project's What is Your G Status virtual celebration of Immigrant Heritage Week 2023. Immigrant Heritage Week came about in 1907. April 17th was the day that more immigrants came through Ellis Island than ever before. And that is where Immigrant Heritage came about. My name is Lorna Harris, and I'm the executive producer of Immigrants Are Us, the Generation Project, simply called the G Project for short. The G Project came about in 2014 with immigrant artist Edward Hillel, who hooked up with Bertha Lewis, the founder of the Black Institute and community organizer, to really take a look through photographs and portraiture to really take a look at the African diaspora.
Immigration, again, if we're going to be a new majority, and immigration is raging, then our Latino brothers and sisters are our cousins. These are our relatives. But I also knew this, that racism was trying to tear us apart. And so, when I would talk to African Americans, says, oh, well, you know, people try to take our jobs, you know, these low-wage jobs. I'm not, you know what? I am not going to try to have someone come to realizing that immigration reform is a human rights issue, is a civil rights issue. You know why? Because I know too many black folks that have immigrants in their background hiding in plain sight. And so I said, we have a whole generation. And I was trying to be clever with the kids, you know how they talk about G's and OGs. So I said, what do I need? I want to appeal to older folks and to the new generation. And therefore the G Project was born, which is to make visible those of us who have mothers, fathers, grandfathers, grandmothers, great-grandmothers, who can identify with the ancestors and the immigrants in our background. And so it was a different way for me to get African Americans to talk about their immigration status. Anytime you've got Colin Powell, Nicki Minaj, and any number of writers, poets, scientists, who in this country, looking at the surface, you're just black. Well, black is deeper and more diverse. And so the G Project, the Generation Project, is to surface that immigrant connection.
Antes les daba alcohol gratis. Siempre lo puse en el internet, lo puse. Si necesitan algo, pero si realmente lo necesitan, vengan a la vecina. comenzamos a dar nuestra comida gratis. ¿Cómo podemos negar a gente que venía y necesitaba comida? Mi mamá comenzó a preparar bastante comida en cantidad para tratar de darle lo que se pudiera a la gente.
So Immigrant Heritage Week, through the Mayor's Office of Immigration, invited us to collaborate for Immigrant Heritage Week, which was perfect for us. And in 2019, we held our first convening of What is Your G Status? And in finding out what our G status was, the project is really based on the premise that we are all immigrants, each and every one of us. And the G project is based on the premise that we are immigrants of various generations that have been in the United States. G0s were born elsewhere. G1 are first generation. G second generation, and so forth. And that's how we determine our G status. So knowing what your G status is informs how you move through the world. It informs who you are and who your neighbors are and what you want to do and what you have done. And the initiative is constantly evolving with this through this public art campaign and through exhibitions, convenings, and symposiums, and utilizing the power of knowing what your G status is. We've been able to really, really impact the questionable issues of anti-immigrant rhetoric and all of the violence. We've been able to really, really put a positive spin and know that we see ourselves in each other and each other in ourselves by sharing stories. So our goal is to really bring people together and to seek being on the same page, to celebrate our sameness, to celebrate our differences, to know that we are all immigrants.
What did you put?
I put a little 4-leaf clover and rice because I love Irish, and my last name is McGrady.
So let's get started with this timely and important conversation. I'm very excited to welcome into the conversation about their G status and celebrating Immigrant Heritage Week my esteemed panelists. Welcome, Suzanne Mannion. Suzanne, I'd like you to introduce yourself. Tell us a bit about who you are and what you do.
Thank you, Lorna. I'm happy to be here. So I'm Suzanne Mannion, Director of Public Affairs with the Statue of Liberty-Ellis Island Foundation. So our organization has been around since the early 80s, created to raise money for and oversee the restoration of the Statue of Liberty for her centennial, and then Ellis Island for its centennial. Ellis Island, as many may be aware, was the first federal immigration station here in the U.S. It opened in 1892. And its peak years went through just about the mid-20s. And during that time, some 12 million immigrants passed through the doors on their way from their home to a new life here in the US. Today, as many as 35% of Americans can trace at least one ancestor through Ellis Island. And we tell the story of not just Ellis Island immigration at the museum, on Ellis Island, but America's immigration story. And as Lorna has said, we're all immigrants, save those who were indigenous, but we all have an immigration story, and that's something the foundation, along with our National Park Service partners with the museum, we look to celebrate and educate people about. More than 2.5 million people visit the Ellis Island Museum every year. A good half of them are from overseas. So it's a wonderful opportunity to share the U.S. immigration history experience with a global audience.
Great, 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 great. Suzanne, we'll come back to you because I know that you have more news for us about the foundation and the centennial celebrations, as well as bringing something to share with us of your immigrant heritage. And our next person that we're really going to talk about immigration and celebrating is Laurence Pinckney. Laurence, tell us about yourself.
Hello. So good to
Hi.
be invited to this project with such astute panelists. So I'm originally from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and I came to New York maybe about this area about 30 years ago and stayed. My last name is Pinckney, so as many of you know, that's from the Declaration of Independence and Constitution, whatever. And Lorna, we had this discussion whether I'm a 7, or 8, or 10, or 3, but I only can go back 3, right?
Mm-hmm.
3 generations.
Mm-hmm.
As a profession, I am a real estate broker in Manhattan. I also own Zenbiz Travel, which is a bespoke travel agency that books people around the world. So, and to the end where your project is involved, I make it a habit, no matter where in the world that I go, that I connect people. I think that's very important because we all are from somewhere else. So I think that's it. And I think I answered my second question. What G am I, right?
Yeah, you did. You talked about you can only remember, or only that you can only count back to being a G3. Even
That's right.
though I question that. And it's very, very interesting that what is your G status, the stories and the events that come out of it. So
Well,
thank you. Go
but
ahead,
you
Laura.
want to more, we can chop. But it's interesting because my father was from Aiken, South Carolina, and my mother was from Maryland. So one went to Fisk, one went to Cheney, right? I can't go much further. My mother's mother died when she was 4. My father's mother died when she was 7. So when we can trace the Pinckney side, which is my father's side, but very little on my mother's side. So, it's an important project.
It is an important project. It's offering you an opportunity to really go back and do some research. I know that's what happens to everyone that's been involved. Thank you, Laurence, very much for sharing that with us. And now we're going to go to Kyle Athayde. Hey, Kyle.
Hey, how are you? So good to see
Fine.
you.
It's good to see you too. And I'm really looking forward to hearing all about you.
Absolutely. Yeah. So as you know, I'm the Associate Director of New Initiatives at Lincoln Center for the Performing Arts, which is the world's most renowned cultural and performing arts center. We're home to many of the world's most renowned performing arts organizations. At Lincoln Center, I oversee the strategic programs and approaches that enhance the Lincoln Center's commitment to innovation, diversity, creativity, as well as community engagement and impact. And in this role, and which is what gave me the opportunity to work with many on this panel and with many others as well, I oversaw the planning and implementation of Festival of New York, which was an unprecedented citywide initiative that coalesced organizations from across the sectors and across the 5 boroughs to celebrate and rebuild New York City in response to the pandemic last year. So that was really exciting to work. But actually, before I joined Lincoln Center, which is really relevant to this conversation, I actually worked for almost a decade as the state outreach director for the New York State Office for New Americans, which is the state's immigration office. In this role, I oversaw major statewide initiatives such as Naturalize New York, which is a public-private partnership, the first of its kind to help people with their naturalization and to inform them of the federal fee waiver, which is an important program. Also oversaw Cell Ed, which is a mobile English learning program, as well as an Immigrant Community Navigators program. So, you know, I have very, not only personal connection to this issue, but professional as well. So really excited to join this panel and to talk about so many issues and to celebrate Immigrant Heritage Week. Because to me, you know, New York City is what I say is the gateway to the rest of the country. You know, Suzanne mentioned this earlier about, you know, everybody in this country was welcomed into this country by the indigenous people. And so, you know, we continue that tradition of welcoming newcomers, whether it was by choice or whether people were forced, because there is obviously complicated histories and how people came into this country. And so, you know, we'll talk more about that. But the tradition has always been about welcoming. And so, you know, I'm excited to continue that.
Thank you so much, Kyle. There's a lot more to discuss and a lot more to talk about. And I find it very interesting that you have made a career of being an immigrant, so to speak. You know, that's really, really exciting. So thank you for that. And Aisha Diori.
Hi, everybody. I guess I'm Generation Zero, right? I came here when I came here when I was a little girl to New York City. I've never left New York City because no other city in the United States gives me the same energy as New York City. I am the executive director of Africa Everything, which is an organization that does nonprofit work on the continent. We help renovate and rebuild schools in West Africa. We also foster education-based programming. And here we bring the diaspora together, meaning, like in different facets of the diaspora, bringing them together. And in my kind of like work, you can say I'm an events curator, events planner, events director. I work for the Schomburg Center, doing events there. I did the most successful First Friday events, which brought revenues to the Schomburg Center, and also targeted different facets of the immigrant populations and different facets of populations as well. Because when you talk about the diaspora, we are so broad, we're so big. It's not just one facet. And I guess we don't do our breakdowns now, right? So just Gen O, I came here when I was a little girl, many, many years ago.
And you came from Nigeria.
I came from Nigeria, but I'm from 3 West African countries.
What are they?
Okay, so Niger, Nigeria, and Ghana. My granddad is the first president of Niger Republic.
Wow, that's
so that's why my name is so like, it's so like people like Aisha Diori. That doesn't sound this way. That doesn't sound that way. It's because it's from Amani Diori, who was the first president. So my dad was in exile in Nigeria, where he met my mom, who's Nigerian and Ghanaian. And from there, they met because, his dad was, there was a coup. His mother got killed. Her name is, who I'm named after, Aisha Diori. She went down fighting with a gun, as the coup happened. And his father was put into prison. And he and all of the family members went to different parts of Africa, Abidjan, Cote d'Ivoire, Nigeria, wherever they can kind of go because they were, being hunted at the time. So that's how he met my mom in Nigeria, my mother who's a travel agent. And then that happened.
Mm-hmm. Very, very interesting. The violence that takes place during these immigrant stories. Yes. I myself shared that I was a G7, but my family migrated to the north during the Great Migration, right? And they were running because they were threatened. I told you we were free. We had our own property, but we had to fight for that property. And the sheriff came in and said, if you're not here by midnight, we're taking this property. So that's why my relatives came up north. That's why my relatives came up north. So hearing these interesting stories about 1776 and the Declaration of Independence and working to make New York City a better place from Kyle through his work, and Suzanne at Ellis Island and the Statue of Liberty, which is such a symbol of freedom.
It really is. And I'm proud to know that we're telling more than just the Ellis Island story. And as I'm listening to all of your stories, I'm a G4. As far as I can tell, that relative left Ireland during the potato famine and came here. I believe left family behind. I at the Ellis Island Family History Center, which our foundation manages, my colleagues there help people with their family research, specifically the arrival records. So I've spoken with them, and with their help have learned when my great-great-grandfather, Michael Mannion, when he was naturalized, I stumbled across his papers to be drafted into the Civil War. He was not yet a citizen from the math I'm doing. And just hearing everyone's individual story here, something that actually makes me sad when I go through the museum and I see the rhetoric and the negativity and the slurs that were put upon immigrants from the turn of the 19th century. So much of the same language is being repeated today about the current immigrant. And it's disheartening because you're taking our jobs, you're not like us, you don't look like us. That's always happened. So to Kyle's point about us being welcoming, there's certainly that element. That's a big element, but the negative feedback that many immigrants receive, it's not new. And I just keep hoping that as a country, as a people, we default to the welcome, because we all came here and we all made a life, and we've made this country what it is. Each year, our foundation celebrates a group of immigrants with something we now call the Statue of Liberty Ellis Island Award, formerly the Family Heritage Award. And it's mostly notable people. We've honored Cicely Tyson, whose family came through the West the Caribbean. Same with Colin Powell. We've honored Yogi Berra, Bruce Springsteen. So many notable names, but then also immigrants themselves. Madeleine Albright, who came here as a child. And they speak so eloquently about the opportunity that this country gave them. Josie Nattori, the designer, who's also a member of our board now, says what she's achieved was only doable in this country, and she's forever grateful to it. So speaking to immigrants, I think should give us, those of us who were born here, a different appreciation, because I think most people who come here realize there's opportunity, and I think we take that for granted sometimes.
We do.
I want to say something really quickly. So to chime into Suzanne, during the potato farming, some of the Irish farmers went to Ghana and to Elmina. So my mother has Irish blood. Her last name is Graves. So, literally some of the family that came to they went to different parts of the world, right? Some of them went to Elmina in Ghana and married, intermarried, and, did the potato farming, own gold mines there, and did things. So a lot of people in the Elmina area are a little lighter because, of the mix, and of course, the slave trade as well. But that's that's another story. But but for the potato farming, a lot of the farmers, and one of the farmers married, and the Graves family has Irish blood in them.
I'm telling you that one of the best things about my job is I learn something new every day. I never knew that story. And that's amazing, because we're not just immigrants here. I mean, it's a global world now. There's no getting around that. And just imagine the journey that my great-great-grandfather took across the ocean, your ancestor making their way down through the continent. I give immigrants such credit. And, those are the ones who are landing in an airplane now. I can't imagine getting on a boat that's smaller than my living room. I don't know if I would have had the courage. I really don't.
Yeah.
I really don't.
So we know that we do what we have to do. And we also do what we want to do, believe it or not. And what is so powerful about knowing what your G status is and sharing those stories are getting information like we're getting today during this conversation. I mean, can you believe in 2023 that we're still having this conversation? So when we ask what your G status is, it's an opportunity to really counteract the violence, the xenophobia. When I talk to people as executive producer of this project, I don't want to hear anything about immigrants. Like Suzanne said, they're taking our jobs. They need to go back to where they came from. And I simply ask them, what is your G status? And they're like, what are you talking about? Well, where was your mother born? In Sicily. And where were you born? So if those same attitudes were preventing or told to your parents and to their ancestors, where would we be as a country today? So the stories might change, but they really don't change. Haven't you noticed that they're same stories over and over again? Does anyone want to speak to that?
Yeah, I was just going to say, actually, Lorna, that this is why I love what the G Project is doing, because I think the framework for when our society talks about immigration are usually exclusively to those who just migrated here, or even sometimes first generation. My G status is first generation, G1, and quite often I say I've lived the experience, immigrant experience, because I'm still living under the culture of my parents and the rules of my parents. So that's of the old country, right? And so I always say, that it will truly be like my kids who have a first generation experience where they've been Americanized, because that's, the world that I've been growing up in. But I think, this idea of, and this is how I'm an English lit major. One of my favorite quotes is, the past is prologue, right? So when you think about it in that way, that everybody has this sort of family tree of immigration, where our stories started in some other country. And then, back to that idea of perseverance, whether it was a dangerous experience, a forced experience, an experience of choice. But that everybody's story sort of branches out and goes into that. And so we all have a shared immigrant history, even when people want to deny that. We live in a world of borders, and I think the nature of borders is that it separates. That's literally what a border does, right? It separates. And so that's how people sort of think about immigration, is like, they're of that group, or they're from that country, and that's not me. And people will forget their history, right? They will forget that what we consider ethnic whites now, right? Like Italians or the Irish went through very significant immigrant experiences themselves and were discriminated against, right? We always see, Irish need not apply, or that Sicilians or other Italians were viewed as others as well. And so I think the framework of this has been, I think, a game changer, because it allows people to say, well, it's not just about, did I just get over here, but where does my story go? What was the past? How was that the context for now?
And Lorna, if I can just jump in for a second.
Of course.
Because I have a question for Laurence. So oral history is so important. There's many thousands of oral histories that were collected of Ellis Island immigrants, as well as people who worked at Ellis Island. And the story, when the first time this person tried pizza, just so these different experiences. But to what Kyle said about what he's experiencing based on his family's culture, I hope we don't lose that. I think it's just, this sounds so corny, but that's what makes it cool to be here, So Laurence is saying he can go back 3 generations. And I'm wondering what stories, what oral histories are part of your family, Laurence, that that information and then it stops there. What has been handed down to you guys?
Well, it's interesting because listening to the dialogue, it's to me, it's discouraging because sometimes we miss it all together. And the Irish coming or the Indians coming or anybody else other than Africans coming was forced. And it's a big distinction. So from my mother's side was one side, my father's side, I know a lot more because it was a part of the Southern tradition.
Yes.
But when you're North, right, you come North, then you assimilate something, at least some people would assimilate into that society. So it is very discouraging that I can't go back. It just so happens that my last name is a part of American history. So I know my mother and father was Lorna's complexion. My grandfather was your complexion, Suzanne. So slavery mixed us up so much that we really don't know how far back that is. So there is a certain degree of melancholy with that. However, within that merger, gives me the opportunity to speak a certain way and to make stuff happen. So what I do is when I go to Africa, when I go to Brazil, when I go to London, I go and reach out for people there that I can kind of give some of the American commercial skills to lift them up. So today at WTM, Aisha, in Cape Town, I have a young guy that I started mentoring 15 years ago. He's at that convention in my place.
Wow.
And it's just amazing because people that know South African history, I mean, that's amazing that a 32-year-old is sitting in the place of somebody like me. So thank you. I will come visit you, Suzanne. You'll walk me through. Maybe we can find a little bit more about the thread. So I can become a OG like Lorna 7 Deep.
Yes, 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 yes. So in doing the G project, like I said, the stories are so impactful. We learn so much. There's always something new. There's never been a time when some new information came up or who's related to who. And some of the themes, like I didn't really talk about, and you should visit our website, thegproject.org, because we actually are a public art campaign. And as this initiative to really, really generate art, we use specially designed cards once people do know their G status to really illustrate or demonstrate in some type of way on that card what their G status means to them. And there have been really interesting themes that have come from these visual cards. We've seen a lot of hearts. We've seen a lot of water. We've seen the Statue of Liberty. We've seen a lot of flags, but we've also have emerged with a collection of art cards that we would like to publish in a tabletop book and also exhibit it around the country. But we also learned that we all have a certain sense of pride once we discover our G status.
Okay, hi, my name is Jennifer Moranchow, and what I did is wrote a letter to my mom and dad that talks about their story and how they left everything behind in Mexico to give me and my sisters a better life. And I'm just always grateful and thankful for that, because I know it's very difficult coming from where they lived, and now I have opportunities, and so do my sisters, and I want to and hope to make them proud.
Hi, how you doing?
So I thank you very, very much. But there's another part of this conversation that's so important. We ask you as panelists to bring something of significance to you to share with us. I'm going to share my photo. My first photo, these are my cousins. They're all girls from the 1700s, and they came from my ancestor, Sam May. There were 11 brothers, and I won't get into the whole story, right? But these are the children, and they're very well dressed. And sometimes we think as immigrants, like you hear Suzanne's stories about the potato famine and how poor everybody was. Well, with the Africans, the enslaved Africans, I'm learning from my own family history that our sense of regalness, our sense of being queens and kings came with us from the very beginning. How we ate, how we dressed, and what we did to contribute to this country, the beauty of this country. One more thing, my baby picture. Wasn't I cute? I think I have the same hairdo today as I did back then when I used to have more hair. But this picture is so important because my relatives, my ancestors made this dress by hand. They weren't using sewing machines. So we all have that type of history too, special outfits, special food. So I'm really proud to share my baby picture. Kyle, what did you bring?
So I also did a picture. It's a digital picture. Let me see if I can share it here, or if Richard can share it later. But it's actually from when I got to visit Ellis Island last year as part of the Festival of New York, and I actually got to see my family name up on the wall. And so I took a picture next to it. And, you know, to me, it's a very cool thing because it's one of many, right? And I think, you know, not to get corny here, but it's like out of many one, right? And it's, you know, you see the history, you see all the people who are coming, and then it also makes you reflect what, you know, like what Laurence was talking about earlier about those whose names aren't on that wall either.
Right.
Whose names are lost to history, whose genealogies are lost to history as well. But it makes you think about moving forward. And, you know, you were talking about the work that I did in the immigration world. And, you know, we're still doing that at Lincoln Center now, where we're, you know, our programming is more diverse. It's reflective of our communities. And one of the things that I've been doing has been building an immigrant network there as well. So for people who have traditionally not felt comfortable coming into spaces like that, to say, hey, you have a place here too. This is your space as well. And one of the things that I always say is, like, you know, I never use the phrase pay it back. Because to me, that sounds very transactional, but it's also about paying it forward. And that's the language that I use, because it's about how do we evolve? How do we move forward? And how do we continue with that as well? And so that's all of the thoughts that were coming into my head when I got to, you know, visit Ellis Island last year and the Statue of Liberty, and really made me think about, you know, how do we move forward from here? You know, and it's never easy. Very much like immigration or slavery was, right? It was not easy, and we're still dealing with those ramifications to this day. But how do we move forward together and persevere and make sure that we're not only respecting those histories, but making sure that we're a more welcoming place than it was for us when we got here, or for our ancestors. So, yeah.
Suzanne, I remember, and Aisha, we're going to see what you have brought with you as well. But I do remember going to the Statue of Liberty. I'm from the Midwest. My daughter was 5 years old at the time, and we were tourists. And that's when you can go to the top, right? We walked all the way. And then as we were going through, we went through the pictures, and my daughter says, Mommy, where are all the Black people? You know, we saw a few, but it really struck her at 5 years old. So again, the G Project is impactful because we share these stories, we tell these stories, we illuminate these stories, and there can be nothing more powerful than knowing who's who. Who's your neighbor? Who's the guy down the street that you go to? So the G Project, again, fills that gap. So, Aisha, here we are. What did you bring?
Well, I brought, you know, Nigeria is known for its like vibrant colors and vibrant material. Ankara material was a material that has been used for years, has been created by local artisans, and it's called Ankara material, like for major weddings. Or one thing that when you go to Nigeria, you see everybody is very proud of wearing their cultural wear, you know, their native wear. Of course, now they're made in funky designs, they're made in jackets and everything. So I love fashion. I went to FIT. So I know that when I was growing up in New York, I maybe walked away a little bit from my African culture, became really more immersed in what is the Western ideology of what is fashion, what's trends and everything. But being able to full circle by embracing my whole culture with what I do, how I do, and give back. So I just thought bringing the material. So that's why the event that we have, which is Africa Everything, we ask everybody to wear African material, because it celebrates who we are, and we don't have to, because of who we are, we don't have to feel shy about expressing that this is what we wear, this is who we are. It makes us uniquely different, but everybody can be a part of it as well. So Ankara material, even though now it is really predominantly made by Dutch West Indian, like a Dutch company. A lot of artisans are not given the monies, you know, for the industrial, you know, machines and everything. So now it's $1 trillion, you know, because everybody in Africa and people love Ankara material. It's being made in Dutch, but there's still some local companies that still make Ankara in Nigeria, in Ghana, and in some of the other, you know, there's very few though, because now it's being taken overseas. And of course, you know, the Chinese are now also making it in bulk in their way as well. But the true Ankara material doesn't budge. So that's what I brought to share with you guys.
Thank you so much. I wish you could stand up a little bit more so I could see a little bit more.
I think I knocked something down. You see, Lorna, you're trying to set me up. I'm just going to sit down.
Okay, but I can see the colors. I can see the colors. And as an African American, for special events, we were always like, put on your African garb. And at one point, I remember in the 80s, it was so popular to wear African clothing. But at that time, people were like, oh, you're a pseudo-African. You guys remember hearing anything about the word pseudo in our culture, right?
Yeah, and now it's a switch. You know that there's a wave of African Americans that don't want to be associated with Africa. I don't know if you guys have heard of that now. They've created a whole organization, and they don't want to be associated that they came from Africa. They say they're from America. They're not from Africa, and they call Africans names and things like that. And they say that we're not diaspora. We're not a part of the diaspora. We are African Americans. So that's the flip side, right? It's so crazy how even in school, when I was growing up in school in junior high school, I got bullied for being African booty scratcher, you know, because of my accent. You know, now I've lost it a little bit. You know, I can still do it, but you know, it's literally like you get teased for the way that your food smells when you opened your food that your mother packed for you, things like that. And I'm sure a couple of us on here have gone through different things like that in school, but so literally now that it's so funny, it's full circle now. African culture is so embraced. The music is like the hottest thing. It's so funny to see how everybody's scrambling. Kamala was just in Ghana. Everybody's scrambling to go to Africa to see what's going on in Africa. And I'm like, but Africa wasn't the move at one point. Nobody wanted to be there. You were shunned. Africans are less than, and now it's like somewhere it's cool. It's funny how sometimes history goes full circle.
Yeah, and this is really how the G Project got started. Back in the day, in 2014, our artistic director, Edward Hillel, who's an immigrant himself, photographer, teamed up with Bertha Lewis of the Black Institute. And Bertha's work has really, really been for a long time, focusing on the African diaspora. And where people are from and how they're connected to Africa. So as an African American, it's really, really complicated because we do have that history of the diaspora, as well as the connections to other places in the world. And Laurence, you talked about it a little bit, of the colors and the mixed marriages and all of those things that have happened. And again, knowing your G status helps. So let's hear a little bit more from you guys about, do you have any more stories to share and tell us about what's
Laurence
going on?
has his picture to share. Laurence, what's he?
Oh, I'm so sorry, Laurence.
Use my ink to print out this picture. You don't want me to show my pictures.
I started talking and lost myself in this
all right,
thing.
You know how we are. We keep people together here. Oh, you go. So here you go, Juan.
Wow.
Handsome.
Look at that. That's that bourgeois little Irene outfit. That's what happens when you grow up in Philly. And then this is one in for Easter.
Oh, how appropriate.
And just like you say, it's like you didn't come outside with no pants dropping and baseball cap. For Easter, you would dress up.
How appropriate.
But Aisha, like you say, I just want to invite people. We're going to South Africa in November. And I would love for anybody that wants to come to join us. I have like 4 seats left, thank God. So it has gotten hot.
Uh-huh.
And
Mhm.
I just think it'd be great to spread the world. And I will say something as a global travel agent. What's amazing to me, by the way, I love Goa. I'm going to go to Goa. The nicest people I've ever met from Goa.
I actually, Lawrence, I actually used to live in South Africa. I used to live in Pietermaritzburg.
Wow.
Outside Durban. Yeah.
Wow, man.
Yeah.
Kyle, you've been everywhere.
But that's how you get that global experience. And
Mhm.
one of the major things that I find is where I have very affluent African Americans who will ask me to book them Paris, London, Germany. But if I say Africa, it's like they're going to the moon. It's something we really have to reprogram.
Yeah.
Africa has so much more than the animals. They have some great people there. And again, this is somebody keeps belling. That's not my bell, I know, but all right.
That's my bell.
Oh, okay. That's what I got.
So Suzanne, thank you, Laurence, for that. Suzanne, what did you bring to share?
I brought a picture of that person, Michael Mannion, I was telling you about. Now, yeah, Rich is going to have to work his magic because this thing is in a frame and shiny and all that kind of thing.
Wow.
That's some serious facial hair.
No doubt, right?
Dapper Don.
Yeah.
So
Dapper.
looking very serious. They didn't smile.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. You should see the wife. She looks even a little more upset.
Oh, no, she definitely looks upset.
Right? And I don't know why her collar is shining, but when my aunt had these pictures hanging in her home when we were growing up, and I didn't like walking down that hallway because they looked so creepy. And she gave them to me when she sold her house. So now I get to just look at them. So that's Michael and Marcella, both from Westmeath, Ireland, just west of Dublin. So, and it's funny, you were talking, when you're talking about your clothing, which is actually so spectacular. I didn't mean to wear this Irish looking color, but I'm glad I did. I did want to mention too, Kyle talked before about seeing his family's name at Ellis Island, and he's referring to the American Immigrant Wall of Honor. And that was introduced in 1990. And there are now nearly 1 million names on it. And we had to actually close the original wall because it was so populated, and we are about to announce that we're extending it. So later this year, we'll start to being able to take names again. And a hope of mine, because when it started in the 90s, it really was people focusing on Ellis Island immigrants, but we are hoping all immigrants, it doesn't matter when your family came, it's celebrating people coming here to create a life. And that's so the Wall of Honor is open to everyone, to celebrating everyone's story. So if any of the audience is interested, ellisisland.org, you can make your way to information about the Wall of Honor on Ellis Island.
Okay. Well, this is what Immigrant Heritage Week 2023 is all about. Telling your stories, sharing your stories, and really, really documenting your stories. Suzanne, I wanted to ask you, where do your ancestors hang? Are they in your hallway now?
Like, where do you kind of lean against a wall? I'll be honest with you, with Marcella behind, because she really freaks me out. I can handle the Abe Lincoln beard, but she just kind of looks like a very unhappy person. But she lived a long life. Him not so much. I don't think he made it to 50. So,
Wow.
So they lean, but if my aunt's watching, don't tell her that.
Well, we're hoping that so many people celebrate with us Immigrant Heritage Week, and we are honored, and it's really a privilege to speak with you guys as our esteemed panelists. Your backgrounds, your history, your contributions of what you're doing is all really, 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 really appreciated. And again, we welcome you to Immigrants Are Us, the Generations Project's special virtual presentation to celebrate Immigrant Heritage Week 2023. Are there any last minute, not even last minute, but are there any announcements of what's going on in your organizations that we should know about? Cal, do you have any upcoming events as well as everyone else?
So, I mean, we have constant programming going on at Lincoln Center. So I would just, direct everybody to go to lincolncenter.org. We have a lot of free programming as well. And, as I mentioned earlier, the programming is not just the traditional things. Of course, we have opera, we have the ballet, we have the Philharmonic on our campus. But we have a lot of up and coming artists as well. Just the other week, I went to a program called La Mezcla. They were making their U.S. debut. It's a Mexican company that was making their debut, and we pulled in a lot of these immigrant organizations that I used to work with in my previous capacity, and invited them to come to the show. And it was the first time that they were seeing at a world-renowned institution people performing in their own language and telling their stories, right? And to see the joy on their face, and to see the happiness, and also to see the comfort that they were feeling in a space, is a wonderful, wonderful thing. So, I just encourage everybody to, check out the website. We have multiple performing arts spaces, and many more programs are free now. And we've actually introduced a choose what you pay feature as well. I always tell the story that I'm born and raised in New York City. And I had, before working at Lincoln Center, I'd only been to Lincoln Center twice in my life. I went there as a CUNY student on a field trip to see the opera. And the second time I went there was when I graduated from CUNY on their stage. And those were the only two interactions I ever had, because I felt that, I could never afford Lincoln Center. I didn't have the clothes to go to Lincoln Center. And it just wasn't a space for me. But, a lot of the programming that we've been doing and a lot of initiatives that we've been introducing has been to make Lincoln Center much more accessible, much more representative of New York City as a whole, and welcoming people into the space, and to utilize our campus. So, yeah.
Well, that's wonderful. And thank you again for your attentiveness of what's going on and bringing all of that engagement to the city and to greater audiences. So, Suzanne, what's happening at Ellis Island?
Well, we are hoping even New Yorkers are coming out, very much so. I can say the same thing. As a fifth grader, I visited Ellis Island, the Statue of Liberty, and didn't go again until I was working here. So come on out if you're a local. And we are hoping with the This is New York celebration this year of the Festival of New York to partner with the G Project and have a booth out at Ellis Island and allow those millions of visitors I told you all about, at least for one day, to share their story, and not just the locals or those from the U.S. who are here, but even the international visitors, to just get a sense and of what we look at from our different generations, and how we are a nation of immigrants. And I'll be curious to see how the international visitors respond to that.
Me too. We're looking forward to it. Laurence, you mentioned a trip coming up. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, how we would find out about it?
Right. Well, you can go to Zenbiz Travel, Zen like in peace, biz like some Black people say business, and travel. So Zenbiz Travel, and it has that as well as other events, and how you can reach if you want us to put together a group experience for you anywhere in the world. And I'm looking forward to getting back to Ellis Island. I'll see you, Kyle, at the Champion at the Met next week or 2 weeks. I'm really excited about it.
That's
For that show as well. Yeah.
Aisha's going to take me through Ghana.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm definitely. You're going to go. And Lorna, I'm definitely going to get as many people to sign up for your project. I think it's a great idea.
Thank you so much. And Aisha, what's going on with Everything Africa?
It just seemed like we just ended with the Festival of New York and everything. I feel like it came like a day after this. It's 2023 already. So for 2023 in July 30th, we're going to have Africa Everything, the fundraiser. Last year's fundraiser, we helped renovate a school in Jamestown, Accra, which is one of the poorest parts of Accra, Ghana, where they're fishermen, and a lot of the kids don't even have access to schools and everything. And there was a school where the kids were attending, like an ad hoc school, like kids from like 4 to 12, right, in the same space, and there was no roof. It was raining on them, but they'll still come to school. There was really no walls and everything. So we used the money that we raised from Africa Everything 2022 to renovate the school, and the kids now have a safe space to learn. Put windows up, and we're able to fix the roof so that they're not getting rained on, and just making sure that we're helping the teachers and supporting the progress, the process as it goes along. Of course, we want to do more, but we're still a small organization, 501c3. So we're going to be doing the fundraiser again, but this year we're infusing Caribbean and African culture. So it's going to be called Africarnival. So we're going to have all of Caribbean culture and African culture, because we're the same people. Honestly, all of us on this call are the same people, but we just come from different places, right? But we're the same people. Right. So the African and Caribbean culture, infusing it. I'm an influencer on the WIACA board, which is the West Indian Carnival Association. So I'm going to pull them in to collaborate and work with us. And through Festival of New York, they partnered us with Barclays Center. And guess who called me again, Kyle? Barclays wants to do after we take over in August again because they really loved it. They wrote it up. It's one of their premier events. They partnered with a lot of different nonprofits, but Africa Everything partnering with them was such a premier event for them. They were so surprised about the entertainment, the vendors, because we had like local businesses, small business, African run businesses come, and like we took over the whole pavilion, Barclays Center outside the pavilion. So they reached out again and they want us to come back. So that more than likely Festival of New York comes back. We're going to be part of that. So it's back to back again, Kyle. Great.
Awesome.
Great.
I'm so happy.
Great. So the G Project working for you.
Yes.
Immigrants Are Us, the Generation Project, is extremely proud to celebrate Immigrant Heritage Week. And we too have events coming up in June and events coming up in July for Immigrant Heritage Month. But we are here each and every day celebrating our G status.
Absolutely.
And I want to thank you again for sharing your G status. I don't know if you've learned, I know you've learned something new, but did you learn something new about yourself? And every day the G Project empowers people to learn something new and to share that.
Yeah.
Thanks again. This has been a great celebration.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
As the executive producer of Immigrants Are Us, the G Project, I work with a talented and dedicated team of individuals. Edward Hillel, who I mentioned before, is the artistic director, and he's with the Harlem Arts Foundation. I also work with Richard E. Pelzer II. Richard is our Director of Community Engagement and Social Media, and he really keeps us on track with how we're doing and who we're collaborating with. Our other director is Alyssa Chrisman, and Alyssa designs everything. She's our creative person, and she is the director of design. Recently, we've been joined by Christina Adiabi. Christina is providing much needed administrative support. So, Immigrants Are Us, as I mentioned before, of the G Project, really acknowledges that we are all immigrants, each and every one of us.